I never thought I'd be the woman standing in front of 300 people, holding a microphone in one hand and the shattered pieces of my dignity in the other. But there I was, on what was supposed to be the happiest night of my 10th wedding anniversary, about to say something that would destroy the man I'd spent a decade loving, building with, and believing in. My name is Rachel Bennett, I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my husband forgot who really owned the ground he stood on. Before I tell you what happened that night, before I tell you what I said into that microphone that made 300 jaws drop and my husband's face drain of every ounce of color, I need you to understand how I got there. Because revenge isn't born in a single moment. It's cultivated in 1,000 small deaths, in betrayals that stack like bricks until you're standing behind a wall so high you can't see who you used to be anymore. If you're watching this from your living room, your car, your office during a break you desperately needed, comment below and tell me where you are. Tell me if you've ever loved someone so completely that you forgot to protect yourself. And if this story resonates with you, if it makes you feel seen or angry or vindicated, hit that subscribe button. Check the description box below because I share stories like this, stories about women who refuse to disappear quietly. Stories about the moment we remember who we are. 10 years. That's how long I gave to Marcus Bennett. A decade of my life, my youth, my body, my money, and my belief that love could conquer anything if you just worked hard enough. I met him when I was 24, fresh out of getting my contractor's license and working 70-hour weeks to build my own construction business from nothing. My father had been a builder, died when I was 19 in a worksite accident, and I'd promised him I'd carry on what he started. By the time I met Marcus at a charity gala in downtown Charlotte, I had 12 employees, 3 ongoing projects, and a reputation for being the kind of woman who showed up to job sites at 5 in the morning with coffee for the crew and blueprints tucked under my arm. Marcus was everything I wasn't. Polished. Charming. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, had a smile that could sell water to a fish, and he looked at me that night like I was the most fascinating woman in the room. Not because of my dress or my hair. I'd shown up in a simple black jumpsuit with concrete dust probably still under my fingernails, but because when he asked what I did, I told him the truth. I build things, I said. Houses. Futures. Dreams, if you want to get poetic about it. He laughed. God, I can still hear that laugh. Warm and genuine, like he'd never heard anything more attractive. A woman who builds dreams, he said, raising his champagne glass. I think I just found mine. We were married 11 months later. Looking back, I can see how fast it moved, how little I questioned, how desperately I wanted to believe that someone like him could love someone like me, someone whose hands were rough and whose mind was always calculating measurements and material costs. But Marcus made me feel like those things made me more, not less. He'd show up at my job sites with lunch, kiss me in front of my crew, tell anyone who'd listen that his wife was building half of Charlotte's new developments. The first 3 years were good. Really good. We bought land together. Well, I bought it, but it felt like ours, and I designed our dream house from the ground up. Every beam, every fixture, every window placement was something I agonized over. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be the kind of home where we'd raise children, host Thanksgivings, grow old watching sunsets from the wraparound porch I'd sketched 100 times before getting it right. I paid for everything. The land was $230,000. I wrote the check. The construction costs ran another $450,000 by the time we were done. I covered it from my business accounts and a loan I personally guaranteed. Marcus contributed what he could, maybe $15,000 here and there for appliances or landscaping, but pharmaceutical sales, even good pharmaceutical sales, doesn't compete with a successful construction business. I didn't care. I loved him. What was mine was his, right? That's what marriage meant. The house took 18 months to build. I was on site every single day, working alongside my crew, making sure every detail was exactly as I'd envisioned. Marcus would come by after work, put his arm around my waist, and whisper, "This is incredible, Rach. You're incredible." And I'd lean into him, covered in sawdust and exhaustion, and feel like the luckiest woman alive. We moved in on a Saturday in April. I remember because the dogwoods were blooming, and I planted 12 of them along the driveway specifically so we'd have that welcome every spring. Marcus carried me over the threshold even though I'd been walking in and out of that house for over a year. We made love in every room that weekend, christening our future, laughing about which room would be the nursery, which would be his office, where we'd put the Christmas tree. But somewhere between year 3 and year 7, something shifted. It was so gradual I didn't notice at first. Marcus started coming home later. Started spending more time on his phone. Started making comments about women we'd see at restaurants or parties. She's really kept herself up, or I like when women make an effort with their appearance. Little digs that felt like paper cuts. Small enough to dismiss in the moment, but enough that over time, they bled me dry. I was working more than ever. My business had exploded. We'd landed contracts for 3 major developments, and I was managing 40 employees across multiple sites. I'd leave the house at 4:30 in the morning and get home at 7 or 8 at night, sometimes later. I was tired. I'd gained maybe 20 pounds from stress and irregular eating and the fact that I was 34, not 24 anymore. My hands were permanently rough no matter how much lotion I used. I had calluses and sunspots and a scar on my forearm from a piece of rebar that had cut me on a job site 3 years earlier. I wasn't the girl Marcus had met at that gala anymore. I was the woman who'd built an empire, but somewhere along the way, I'd stopped looking in mirrors. I'd stopped seeing myself as anything other than a workhorse, a provider, a problem solver. I didn't notice when Marcus stopped looking at me the way he used to. Or maybe I noticed but told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, ridiculous. The truth is, I was so focused on building everything around us that I didn't see what was crumbling right in front of me. It started getting worse about 6 months before the anniversary party. Marcus became distant in a way that felt different from just being busy or stressed. He'd look at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't quite read, something between disappointment and resentment. When I'd try to initiate intimacy, he'd claim he was tired or not feeling well. We went from making love 3 or 4 times a week to once every few weeks, then once a month, then not at all. I told myself it was normal. We'd been together 10 years. The spark fades, right? That's what everyone says. You have to work to keep it alive. So I tried. God, I tried. I'd come home from 16-hour days and put on lingerie that felt absurd on my exhausted, aching body. I'd suggest date nights that he'd agree to and then cancel last minute. I'd ask him what was wrong, if he was unhappy, if there was something I could do differently. "You're being paranoid, Rachel," he'd say, not even looking up from his phone. "I'm just stressed with work. Not everything is about you." But it was about me. I knew it in the way you know when someone's lying, even when they're saying all the right words. I knew it in the pit of my stomach, in the tightness in my chest when I'd catch him smiling at his phone screen and then closing it quickly when I walked into the room. I hired a private investigator 2 months before our anniversary. Her name was Diane Mitchell, mid-50s, former cop, no-nonsense energy that I immediately trusted. I gave her Marcus's schedule, his car's make and model, his favorite places to grab lunch. I felt sick doing it, felt like I was betraying him even though some part of me already knew what she'd find. She called me 3 weeks later and asked me to come to her office. I remember sitting across from her desk, my hands clenched so tight in my lap that my knuckles went white, watching her slide a manila envelope across the cheap wooden surface. "I'm sorry, Rachel," Diane said, and her voice was gentle in a way that made me want to scream. "There's a woman. Her name is Brooke Sinclair, 26 years old. She works as a pharmaceutical rep. They met at a conference about 8 months ago. They've been seeing each other regularly ever since." The photos were worse than I'd imagined. Marcus and Brooke at restaurants I recognized, places we used to go together. Marcus and Brooke walking hand in hand through Freedom Park, where he proposed to me 9 years earlier. Marcus and Brooke kissing in the parking lot of her apartment complex, his hand on her face in that tender way he used to touch me. But the worst photo, the one that made something inside me crack clean in half, was of them in bed together. Diane had somehow gotten a shot through a window, and even though it wasn't explicit, I could see enough. I could see the way he looked at her, the way his hand rested on her bare shoulder, the smile on his face that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. She was beautiful. Of course she was. 26 and beautiful, with long blonde hair and a body that hadn't spent 10 years building things with her bare hands. She looked like the kind of woman who got regular manicures and had time for yoga classes and knew how to pose for Instagram photos. Everything I wasn't anymore. Everything I'd sacrificed to build the life Marcus was now living in. There's more, Diane said, pulling out her iPad. She showed me text messages she'd managed to retrieve. I didn't ask how. Messages where Marcus called Brooke baby and gorgeous. Messages where he complained about me, said I'd let myself go, said he felt trapped in our marriage. Messages where he talked about leaving me but worried about the financial implications. One message stood out, burned itself into my brain so thoroughly I can still recite it word for word. I can't keep pretending to be happy with someone who looks like she just rolled off a construction site. I need someone who makes me feel alive again. Someone beautiful. I drove home that day in a fog. I don't remember the route I took or what songs played on the radio. I just remember pulling into the driveway of the house I'd built with my own 2 hands, the house that was legally in both our names even though I'd paid for every square inch of it, and feeling something inside me shift from grief to rage. Marcus was cheating on me with a 26-year-old pharmaceutical rep, and he thought I was too stupid, too busy, too ugly to notice. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He had no idea that the woman he dismissed, the woman whose appearance he'd mocked, the woman he was planning to leave, she was the woman who'd built everything he lived in, everything he drove, everything he'd become. And in 3 weeks, at our 10th anniversary party that I'd been planning for months, he was going to find out exactly what happens when you betray the woman who holds your entire world in her rough, calloused, capable hands. I just had to decide what I was going to do about it. And let me tell you, when a woman like me decides to burn something down, we make sure there's nothing left but ash. I didn't confront Marcus that night. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers the way every fiber of my being wanted to. Instead, I walked into our house, the house I designed and built and paid for, and I made dinner. I set the table with the plates we'd gotten as wedding gifts. I poured him a glass of the wine he liked. I asked about his day. He barely looked at me. He scrolled through his phone between bites of the chicken masala I'd spent an hour making after a 12-hour workday, and he gave me one-word answers that made it clear he'd rather be anywhere else. With anyone else. With Brooke. I watched him across the table and felt something crystallize inside me. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't even anger. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, perfect clarity. For 10 years, I'd made excuses for him. I'd told myself he was stressed, that marriage was work, that love meant pushing through the hard times. I'd carried the financial burden of our entire life without complaint because I made more money, because it seemed fair, because I loved him and wanted to give him everything. But love is supposed to go both ways. Partnership is supposed to mean something. And sitting there watching him ignore me while he probably texted the woman he was sleeping with, I realized that I'd been in this marriage alone for a very long time. The anniversary party was in 3 weeks. We'd been planning it for 6 months, or rather, I'd been planning it while Marcus occasionally nodded and said whatever I suggested was fine. It was going to be held at the estate at River Run, a venue about 20 minutes outside Charlotte that I'd helped renovate 2 years ago. The owner, Patricia Hayes, had given me a significant discount as a thank you for the work my crew had done. We'd invited 300 people, friends, family, colleagues from both our industries, clients, vendors, people whose names I barely recognized but who Marcus insisted we include. I'd hired caterers, a band, a photographer. I'd ordered flowers, white roses and hydrangeas, elegant and timeless. I'd bought a dress, a beautiful emerald green gown that had cost more than I'd ever spent on a single piece of clothing in my life because Marcus had mentioned once, years ago, that green was his favorite color on me. The invitations had gone out 2 months ago. The RSVPs had been rolling in. Everyone we knew would be there to celebrate a decade of marriage, to toast to our love, to witness what was supposed to be a beautiful milestone. Marcus had no idea that in 3 weeks, that party was going to become his worst nightmare. I spent the next day at my office, door closed, telling my assistant Keisha that I wasn't to be disturbed unless something was actively on fire. Keisha had been with me for 7 years, A sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 40s who'd raised 3 kids on her own and ran my office like a tight ship. She took one look at my face that morning and simply nodded, holding all my calls and rescheduling 2 client meetings without question. I pulled out every document related to our marriage, our finances, our house. I'd always been meticulous with paperwork, came with the territory of running a construction business, so I had everything organized in both physical and digital files. The house was the big one. We'd purchased the land in both our names, but I'd paid for it entirely. The construction loan had been in my name only because Marcus's credit wasn't good enough to qualify for the amount we needed, and his income wasn't sufficient to meet the debt-to-income ratio the bank required. When we'd refinanced after construction was complete, we'd put the deed in both names. My lawyer at the time had advised against it, but I'd insisted. We were married. What was mine was his. God, I'd been so stupid. So trusting. So convinced that love meant sharing everything equally even when the contributions weren't equal at all. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which meant that in a divorce, marital assets would be divided fairly but not necessarily equally. The court would consider who contributed what, who paid for what, whose name was on which accounts. I'd kept meticulous records of every dollar I'd put into that house, every payment I'd made on our vehicles, every deposit into our joint accounts versus what Marcus had contributed. On paper, I'd paid for approximately 92% of everything we owned. The house, the cars, the furniture, the renovations, the landscaping, all of it had come from my income and my business accounts. Marcus had contributed his salary to household expenses like groceries and utilities, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 a year total. His name was on everything because I'd put it there, but his money had paid for almost nothing. I sat in my office staring at spreadsheets and bank statements, and I felt that cold clarity sharpen into something that looked a lot like a plan. I could divorce him. File the papers, split everything according to what was legally fair, walk away with most of what I'd built. I'd be fine financially, my business was thriving, and I'd made smart investments over the years. I'd keep the house, or sell it and split the proceeds in whatever ratio the court decided, and I'd move on with my life. But that felt too easy. Too clean. Too much like letting him off the hook for what he'd done, what he was still doing, what he was planning to do. Marcus had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. He'd made me feel small and undesirable and worthless while sleeping with a woman young enough to be his daughter. He'd complained about me to her, mocked my appearance, called me names in text messages that he thought I'd never see. He'd taken everything I'd given him and decided it wasn't enough because I didn't look like a fucking Instagram model anymore. A divorce would hurt him financially, sure. But it wouldn't hurt him the way he'd hurt me. It wouldn't humiliate him. It wouldn't make him feel the way I'd felt sitting in Diane's office looking at pictures of him with another woman. It wouldn't teach him that you don't get to use people up and throw them away without consequences. No, I needed something bigger. Something public. Something that would make sure everyone who knew us understood exactly who he was and what he'd done. And I had the perfect stage, our 10th anniversary party. 300 people. Our entire social and professional circle. Everyone who'd congratulated us over the years, who'd told us we were couple goals, who'd looked at what we'd built together and felt envious or inspired. They'd all be there in 3 weeks, dressed in their finest, ready to celebrate a marriage that had been dead for longer than I wanted to admit. I spent the next week putting pieces into place. I met with Diane again and asked her to document everything she could in the remaining time before the party. Every meeting between Marcus and Brooke, every text message, every hotel room they checked into. I asked her to put together a comprehensive report with photos, dates, times, locations. Evidence that would be impossible to deny or explain away. I met with my lawyer, Simon Garrett, a man in his 60s who'd handled my business contracts for years. I laid out everything for him, the affair, the financial records, what I was planning to do. Simon leaned back in his leather chair and studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Rachel, I understand you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be," he said carefully. "But publicly humiliating your husband at your anniversary party isn't going to help your case in a divorce. If anything, it could make you look vindictive and damage your credibility." "I don't care about looking credible," I said, my voice steady. I care about making sure he understands what is lost, what he threw away, and I care about making sure everyone else knows who he really is." Simon sighed. "If you're determined to do this, at least protect yourself legally. I'll have divorce papers drawn up and ready to file the day after the party. That way, you control the narrative from a legal standpoint. But Rachel, think carefully about whether this is really what you want. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it rarely brings the peace you're looking for." I left his office with divorce papers that would be ready to go in 2 weeks, giving me time to review and sign them before the party. I knew Simon was probably right about revenge not bringing peace, but I didn't care. I didn't want peace. I wanted Marcus to feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be exposed, vulnerable, humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. At home, I played the perfect wife. I was sweet and attentive, asked about his day, laughed at his jokes when he bothered to make them. I didn't let on that I knew anything. I definitely didn't mention that I'd hired a private investigator or that I had a folder on my laptop with enough evidence to destroy his reputation completely. Marcus seemed almost relieved by my behavior, like he'd been expecting me to figure things out and was grateful I was still oblivious. He started being slightly nicer to me, probably because he felt less guilty when I wasn't asking questions or crying or doing anything that would force him to confront what he was doing. Men are so predictable. They cheat and lie and betray, and then when their wives don't immediately catch them, they convince themselves it must not be that bad. They tell themselves that if you really loved them, you'd know something was wrong. They use your trust against you and call it your failure, not theirs. 2 weeks before the party, I confirmed final numbers with the caterers and the venue. 312 RSVPs. Nearly everyone we'd invited was coming. The band was set, the photographer was booked, the flowers were ordered. Patricia at the estate called to go over final logistics and mentioned how excited she was to celebrate with us. "You and Marcus are such an inspiration," she said warmly. 10 years and still going strong. That's rare these days. I smiled into the phone and said something appropriate about how lucky we were, how much we'd built together, how grateful I was for everything we had. And technically, it wasn't a lie. I was grateful that I'd built everything myself, grateful that I had the strength and resources to survive what was coming, grateful that I'd finally woken up to who I'd married. 1 week before the party, Diane sent me the final report. It was devastating in its thoroughness. 87 documented meetings between Marcus and Brooke over 8 months, text messages that ranged from sexually explicit to emotionally intimate, receipts from hotels and restaurants that Marcus had claimed were work expenses, photos of them together that left no room for doubt or interpretation. There was also something I hadn't expected. Marcus had been looking at apartments. Diane had tracked him to 3 different showings in the past month, all one-bedroom places in downtown Charlotte that rented for $2,000 to $2,500 a month. He was planning his exit. He just hadn't bothered to tell me yet. I sat at my desk in my home office, the office in the house I'd built, in the wing I designed specifically for quiet work and reflection, and I read through every page of that report. I looked at every photo. I absorbed every awful detail of my husband's betrayal. And then I did something I hadn't done since the day Diane had first told me about Brooke. I cried. I let myself sob for everything I'd lost, for the marriage that had died without me noticing, for the man I'd loved who decided I wasn't worth staying faithful to. I cried for the version of myself who believed that hard work and loyalty and love would be enough to keep someone by your side. I cried for 30 minutes, and then I stopped. I washed my face, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, at my 34-year-old face with its sun damage and stress lines and complete lack of makeup, and I made myself a promise. I would walk into that anniversary party in 1 week looking like the woman I was, strong, successful, and done apologizing for not being whatever impossible standard Marcus had decided I'd failed to meet. I would stand in front of 300 people, and I would take back every ounce of power I'd handed him over the past decade. He wanted someone more beautiful, someone who made him feel alive, someone younger and shinier and easier. Fine. He could have her. But first, he was going to pay for thinking he could take everything I'd given him and throw it away like garbage. The party was in 7 days. I had my dress, my evidence, and my plan. All I needed now was the courage to follow through with something that would change both our lives forever. And if there's one thing I'd never lacked, it was courage. You don't build a successful construction business as a woman in the South without learning how to walk into rooms full of men who doubt you and make them respect you anyway. You don't survive your father's death at 19 and turn his struggling company into something profitable without developing a spine made of steel. Marcus had forgotten who he'd married. He'd looked at me and seen someone tired and worn down, someone who'd sacrificed her appearance and her femininity for work and responsibility. He decided that made me less than, made me disposable, made me someone he could betray without consequence. In 7 days, he was going to remember that the woman he'd underestimated was the same woman who'd built everything he'd taken for granted. And by the time I was done speaking into that microphone, he'd realize his mistake. But it would be far too late. The week before the anniversary party passed in a strange, suspended kind of time. I moved through my days like an actress in a play, hitting my marks, saying my lines, playing the role of devoted wife while my real self existed somewhere else entirely, cold and calculating and ready. Marcus, for his part, seemed almost giddy. He was attentive in a way he hadn't been in years, kissing my forehead when he left for work, asking about my day over dinner, even suggesting we watch a movie together one night like we used to do when we first got married. I knew why, of course. Diane had sent me photos from that very week. Marcus and Brooke at a jewelry store in South Park, Marcus looking at rings while the 26-year-old blonde smiled up at him with stars in her eyes. He was planning to leave me right after the party. Probably thought it would be easier to end things on a high note, after we'd celebrated our 10 years together in front of everyone we knew. Maybe he convinced himself it would be kinder that way, less suspicious, like he could pretend our marriage had simply run its natural course rather than admit he'd been cheating for 8 months with a woman who could have been our daughter if we'd started young. I played along. God help me, I smiled and cuddled up to him during that movie, some action thriller he'd picked that I couldn't have summarized if my life depended on it, and I let him put his arm around me and pretend he was a good husband. I let him believe I had no idea what was coming, that I was still the naive woman who'd put his name on a house he'd never paid for, who'd built him a life he was now planning to walk away from. Men like Marcus think women like me are stupid. They think because we're busy, because we're focused on practical things like earning money and managing businesses and keeping households running, that we don't notice when they're slipping away. They mistake our kindness for weakness, our trust for ignorance. They never see the reckoning coming until it's too late. 3 days before the party, I had lunch with my sister, Audrey. She's 2 years younger than me, 32, and she works as a nurse at Atrium Health. We met at a cafe near her hospital, and the moment I sat down across from her, she knew something was wrong. "Ratch," she said, her eyes scanning my face. "What's going on? You look tired," I offered with a bitter smile. "Worn down? Like I let myself go." Audrey's expression shifted to concern. "That's not what I was going to say. You look like you're about to either break down or burn something down, and I need to know which one so I can help appropriately." I loved my sister. She was the only person in my family who'd never doubted me, never questioned my decision to go into construction, never made me feel like I was trying too hard or being too much. When our father died and I'd taken over his struggling business at 19, Audrey had been in nursing school, but she'd shown up at job sites on her days off to help with administrative work, to make sure the crew was fed, to keep me from collapsing under the weight of grief and responsibility. So I told her everything. I told her about Marcus and Brooke, about the private investigator, about the text messages where my husband had called me unattractive and complained about being trapped. I told her about the apartment showings and the jewelry store visit and my plan for the anniversary party. Audrey listened without interrupting, her jaw getting progressively tighter as I talked. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said finally. "First of all, I'm going to need you to give me Marcus's work address so I can go slash his tires during my lunch break tomorrow. Second, I'm coming to that party, and I'm bringing pepper spray in case you need backup. And third, and this is important, Ratch, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Because once you blow up your marriage in front of 300 people, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure," I said without hesitation. He's already blown up our marriage, Audrey. I'm just making sure everyone knows who lit the match. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Then I'm with you. Whatever you need. I need you to be there, I said quietly. I need to look out into that crowd and see at least one person who's on my side when I do this. You'll have more than one person on your side, Audrey said fiercely. Once people find out what he's done, what he's been doing while you built everything for him, Ratch, you're not going to be the villain in this story. He is. I wanted to believe her. But I also knew how the world worked. Women who made scenes were called crazy, bitter, vindictive. Women who didn't handle betrayal with grace and quiet dignity were punished for their anger. I was about to stand in front of my entire social circle and expose my husband's affair, and I had no idea how people would react. Would they be on my side? Would they understand why I'd chosen this particular moment, this particular stage? Or would they decide I was unhinged, that I'd humiliated myself along with Marcus, that I should have handled it privately like a mature adult? I didn't know. But I also didn't care as much as I probably should have. Sometimes you reach a point where you're so tired of swallowing your pain to make other people comfortable that you just need to spit it out and let them choke on it for a change. 2 days before the party, I went shopping for new shoes. The emerald dress I'd bought months ago was hanging in my closet, still in its garment bag, and I'd realized I didn't have the right shoes to go with it. I drove to Nordstrom and spent 45 minutes trying on heels until I found a pair that made me feel powerful instead of uncomfortable, black stilettos with a strap across the ankle that gave me an extra 3 inches of height. While I was there, I stopped at the makeup counter. I almost never wore makeup beyond mascara and maybe some lip gloss for important meetings, but something made me pause. The woman working the counter, Madison, according to her name tag, was probably 25, with a face full of perfectly applied makeup that probably took her an hour every morning to achieve. "Can I help you find something?" she asked with a bright, professional smile. I almost said no. Almost walked away. But then I thought about Marcus and Brooke, about how he'd called me unattractive, about how he decided I wasn't worth staying faithful to because I prioritized building a business over maintaining whatever impossible beauty standard he decided I was failing to meet. "Yes," I heard myself say. "I have an event in 2 days. I need you to teach me how to do makeup that says I'm about to ruin someone's life and I'm going to look good doing it." Madison's smile shifted into something more genuine, more conspiratorial. "I can absolutely do that. Sit down." An hour later, I left Nordstrom with $300 worth of makeup and a detailed diagram Madison had drawn showing me how to apply all of it. She'd done my face right there at the counter as a demonstration, and when she'd spun me around to look in the mirror, I'd barely recognized myself. I looked not like someone else, exactly. I looked like a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. My eyes looked bigger, my cheekbones more defined. My lips were this perfect rose color that somehow made my whole face look brighter, more awake. I didn't look like the exhausted construction business owner who rolled out of bed at 4:30 every morning and didn't bother with anything more complicated than sunscreen. I looked like someone who had time for herself, who prioritized herself, who remembered she was allowed to be more than just capable and competent. I looked beautiful. Not like Brooke. I'd never look like Brooke with her 26-year-old skin and her yoga body and her Instagram-ready aesthetic. But I looked like myself, only better. Like the woman Marcus had met at that gala 10 years ago, before I'd given up caring about anything except work and him. "You look amazing," Madison said softly. "Whoever you're ruining, they deserve it." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. "Thank you. They really do." The day before the party, I met with Simon one last time to review the divorce papers. Everything was in order. Petition for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, preliminary property division based on documented contributions to marital assets, request for the court to consider Marcus's adultery in determining alimony and distribution even though North Carolina had moved away from considering fault in most divorce cases. "You're sure about this?" Simon asked me for probably the 5th time since I'd first outlined my plan. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said, signing my name on the indicated lines. "File these the morning after the party." I want them served to him by the end of next week. Simon nodded and tucked the papers into his briefcase. Rachel, I hope you know what you're doing. This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly, I said. I'm just making sure everyone else can see it. That night, the night before our 10th anniversary party, the night before I was going to stand in front of 300 people and destroy my marriage with words I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks, Marcus suggested we go out to dinner. Let's go somewhere nice, he said, smiling at me with that charming smile that had worked so well 10 years ago. Our last night as a couple in our first decade. We should celebrate just the two of us before the big party tomorrow. I almost laughed at the irony. Our last night as a couple, period, though only I knew that. But I agreed, because at this point, what did one more performance matter? We went to the Fig Tree, an upscale restaurant in Charlotte's Elizabeth neighborhood that we'd been to maybe 3 times in our entire marriage, always for special occasions. Marcus ordered wine, expensive wine, the kind he usually complained about the price of, and he held my hand across the table like we were young lovers instead of 2 people on the edge of devastation. I want to say something, he began, and I felt my stomach clench. I know I haven't been the best husband lately. I've been distant, distracted. Work has been stressful, and I've let that affect us. But sitting here with you tonight, looking at everything we've built together, Rach, I'm so grateful for you. For this life we've created. He looked sincere. He sounded sincere. And if I hadn't seen the photos of him with Brooke, if I hadn't read the text messages where he'd called me unattractive and complained about feeling trapped, if I didn't know he was planning to leave me right after tomorrow's party, I might have believed him. This is what cheaters do. They love bomb you right before they leave, trying to ease their own guilt or maybe just hedge their bets in case their exit strategy falls through. They tell you everything you've been desperate to hear, and they do it with just enough conviction that you want to believe them even when you know better. I'm grateful too, I said, because it was true in a way he couldn't understand. I was grateful that I'd found out who he really was, grateful that I had the resources to survive without him, grateful that I'd built everything on my own so I wouldn't be left with nothing when this was over. Marcus kissed me that night when we got home. Really kissed me, like he meant it. Like he still wanted me. We had sex for the first time in 3 months, and it was simultaneously the best and worst experience of my life. Best because my body had missed being touched, being wanted, being desired. Worse because I knew it was a lie, all of it, and every moment of pleasure was laced with the poison of knowing he was thinking of someone else. Afterward, he fell asleep with his arm around me, and I lay there in the dark staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I'd designed. I thought about tomorrow night. I thought about the speech I'd been writing and rewriting in my head for weeks. I thought about the moment when I'd take that microphone and tell the truth to 300 people who thought we were celebrating love. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just lay there counting down the hours until I'd either vindicate myself or destroy what was left of my dignity trying. By the time the sun came up, I knew there was no going back. Tomorrow night, tonight, now, everything would change. And I was ready. The day of the party arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that felt like a cosmic joke. 75 degrees, gentle breeze, sunshine that turned everything golden. The kind of day that belonged in a romantic movie, not in the story of a marriage ending in public devastation. I woke up at 6 even though I'd barely slept. Marcus was already up, whistling in the shower, actually whistling, like he was excited for the day ahead. I guess he was. In his mind, tonight would be the culmination of 10 years, a beautiful celebration before he made his clean exit into his new life with Brooke. He had no idea that I was about to make it the worst night of his life. I went for a run, something I hadn't done in months. I needed to burn off the nervous energy that was making my hands shake and my heart race. I ran 6 miles through our neighborhood, past houses I'd built or renovated, past families just starting their weekends, past lives that looked so uncomplicated from the outside. When I got back, Marcus was in the kitchen making breakfast. Pancakes, my favorite, the ones with blueberries and a hint of lemon zest that he'd learned to make from my mother's recipe. Another peace offering, another performance. Big day, he said, sliding a plate in front of me with a smile. You excited? Nervous, I said honestly. 300 people is a lot. You'll be great, he said, kissing the top of my head. You always are. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. Hair appointment at 2, I'd booked with Vanessa, a stylist I'd used for years who knew me well enough not to ask too many questions when I requested something different from my usual simple style. She pinned my dark blonde hair into an elegant updo with a few loose tendrils framing my face, somehow making me look sophisticated and effortless at the same time. You look beautiful, Rachel, she said when she was done. Marcus is a lucky man. I smiled and tipped her generously, thinking about how lucky he was about to feel in a few hours. I got home at 4:30 and started the process of getting ready. I laid out everything on my bed like battle armor, the emerald dress, the black stilettos, the makeup Madison had helped me buy, the diamond earrings that had been my mother's, the simple gold necklace Marcus had given me on our first anniversary back when he still put thought into gifts. I took my time with the makeup, following Madison's diagram exactly. Foundation, concealer, contour, highlight, eyeshadow in shades of bronze and gold that made my hazel eyes look almost green to match the dress, eyeliner, mascara, the rose lipstick that somehow pulled everything together. When I was done, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our bedroom and barely recognized myself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging curves I'd forgotten I had. The heels made my legs look longer, my posture straighter. The makeup made me look polished and powerful. I looked like a woman who'd built an empire. Like someone who knew her worth. Like someone you didn't fuck with. Marcus walked in while I was putting on my earrings, and he actually stopped in the doorway, his mouth opening slightly. Wow, he said. Rach, you look, wow. Thank you, I said calmly, watching his face in the mirror. I could see the confusion there, the slight guilt, the cognitive dissonance of seeing his wife, the woman he'd been planning to leave, the woman he'd called unattractive in text messages to his mistress, looking like this. Good. I wanted him off balance. I wanted him questioning himself just enough that what was coming would hit even harder. We drove to the estate at River Run separately. I had to be there early to coordinate final details with Patricia and the vendors, and Marcus was coming straight from picking up his mother who was staying at a hotel nearby. I was grateful for the time alone in my car, the 40-minute drive that gave me space to think, to breathe, to prepare. I pulled up Diane's report on my phone one last time while sitting in the estate's parking lot. I looked at the photos, read the text messages, reminded myself why I was doing this. Not just because Marcus had cheated. People cheat, marriages end, that's painful but survivable. But because of how he'd done it. The contempt in those messages. The way he'd mocked me to her. The way he'd taken everything I'd given him and decided it wasn't enough because I didn't look the way he wanted me to look. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure he understood that you don't get to diminish someone who built your entire life. You don't get to take and take and take, and then walk away acting like the victim because your wife was too busy providing for you to maintain whatever beauty standard you decided she was failing. At 6 o'clock, guests started arriving. I stood in the entrance of the estate with Marcus, greeting people as they came in. Friends from college, colleagues from both our industries, family members who'd watched us grow together over the past decade. Everyone was dressed beautifully, everyone was smiling, everyone was ready to celebrate. You look stunning, Rachel, said Jennifer Morrison, one of Marcus's colleagues. That dress is incredible. Marriage looks good on you both, added Tom Chen, a client of mine who'd hired me to build his company's new headquarters. 10 years and still glowing. Marcus put his arm around my waist and pulled me close, playing the devoted husband for our audience. I leaned into him and smiled, playing my part too, all while my heart hammered against my ribs with anticipation of what was coming. By 7:30, everyone had arrived. The venue looked perfect. Patricia and her team had outdone themselves. White roses and hydrangeas on every table, string lights creating a warm glow throughout the space, the band setting up in the corner playing soft jazz. The bar was open, servers were circulating with appetizers, and people were mingling and laughing, genuinely happy to be there. I made my rounds, thanking people for coming, accepting congratulations, laughing at jokes and stories about Marcus and me from people who thought they knew us. I caught Audrey's eye across the room several times, and each time she gave me a small nod of support, her presence steadying me. Dinner was served at 8. The caterers had prepared the meal I'd carefully selected months ago: filet mignon, roasted vegetables, garlic mashed potatoes, fresh rolls. The food was delicious, I was told by multiple people, though I could barely taste anything I put in my mouth. Marcus was holding my hand under the table, occasionally squeezing it and giving me warm looks that would have meant something if I didn't know they were lies. At one point, he leaned over and whispered, "This is perfect. You did an amazing job planning this." "The night's not over yet," I said, and he smiled like I was talking about the dancing or the cake, not about the bomb I was about to drop on his head. At 9 o'clock, Patricia brought me the microphone. It was time for speeches, the part of the evening where Marcus and I were supposed to thank everyone for coming and say beautiful things about our marriage and our decade together. Marcus went first. He stood up, tapping his glass to get everyone's attention, and the room gradually quieted until all eyes were on him. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice warm and confident. "I can't tell you how much it means to Rachel and me that you're all here tonight. 10 years ago, I met this incredible woman at a charity gala, and I knew within 5 minutes that she was going to change my life." People made appreciative sounds. I kept my face neutral, my smile in place. "Rachel is the strongest, most capable person I know," Marcus continued. "She's built an amazing business, she's created this beautiful home for us, and she supported me through everything. I honestly don't know where I'd be without her." He paused, looking at me with what looked like genuine emotion in his eyes. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "But I've realized something lately. 10 years is a long time. People change. What you want at 24 isn't always what you want at 34. And I think it's important to be honest about that, to recognize when it's time for a new chapter." The room got quieter. People were confused. This wasn't the typical anniversary speech. I saw my mother's face across the room, her expression concerned. Audrey had stood up from her table, her hand covering her mouth. Marcus kept going, oblivious to the fact that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. "What I'm trying to say is, Rachel, you're an incredible woman. But I need to be honest with you and with everyone here. 10 years is enough. I need something different now. I need someone who makes me feel alive again, someone who hasn't let themselves go, someone more beautiful. I think it's time we both moved on. In fact, I'd like you out of the house by tomorrow so I can start my new life." Complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. 300 people staring at Marcus in absolute shock, their faces showing horror, disbelief, disgust. Marcus seemed to realize, suddenly, that he'd made a terrible miscalculation. His face went white. He looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood that he'd just publicly humiliated me in front of everyone we knew, that he'd announced he was leaving me at our anniversary party, that he'd called me unattractive in front of our families and friends. He started, but I was already standing up. "Can I have the microphone, Marcus?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm. He handed it to me with shaking hands, probably hoping I'd try to salvage the situation, or maybe break down crying so he could comfort me and try to spin this as some kind of mutual decision made in the heat of the moment. Instead, I took the microphone, stepped away from our table, and walked to the center of the room where everyone could see me clearly. "Well," I said, looking around at all those shocked faces, "that was quite a speech, wasn't it?" Nervous laughter from a few people. Most just stared. Marcus wants someone more beautiful. Someone who hasn't let themselves go. Someone who makes him feel alive. I paused, letting those words hang in the air. That's his prerogative, I suppose. But there's something Marcus seems to have forgotten. Something I'd like to remind him of before he asks me to leave the house tomorrow. I turned to look directly at him. His face was ashen, and he was gripping the edge of the table like he needed it to stay upright. "Marcus, do you remember who bought the land our house sits on?" "I do. It was me. $230,000, paid from my business account." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Do you remember who paid for the construction of that house? The house you just told me to get out of? That was me too. $450,000. Every permit, every contractor, every fixture. I designed it. I built it. I paid for it. Marcus tried to speak, but no sound came out. In fact, Marcus, do you remember what you've actually paid for in the 10 years we've been married? Because I do. I have spreadsheets. I have receipts. You've contributed maybe 10% of our assets. The cars? Mine. The furniture? Mine. The renovations? Mine. Even the meal everyone just ate tonight. I paid the caterer, the venue, the band. Everything you've been living in, driving, enjoying for the past decade? I provided that. People were starting to look at Marcus with understanding now, with judgment. Some were looking at me with something like awe. So when you say you want me out of the house tomorrow, Marcus, I need you to understand something. I smiled, cold and sharp. You can't kick me out of a house I own. What you can do is pack your bags and leave, because that house is mine. The life you've been living is mine. Everything you thought you were walking away from? You never actually had it in the first place. You were just borrowing it from me, and now I'm taking it back. The room erupted. People were gasping, whispering, some actually applauding. Marcus looked like he might be sick. But I wasn't done yet. There's one more thing everyone should know, since we're being honest tonight. Marcus, you want someone more beautiful? Someone who makes you feel alive? You already have that, don't you? Her name is Brooke Sinclair. She's 26 years old. You've been sleeping with her for 8 months. If the room had been shocked before, it was absolutely stunned now. Marcus's mother let out a cry of dismay. Several people pulled out their phones, probably looking up Brooke's name on social media. You've taken her to restaurants we used to go to. You've walked with her in the park where you proposed to me. You've told her I'm unattractive, that you feel trapped, that you can't wait to leave me. You've been apartment hunting so you can move out and start your new life with her. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I have documentation of all of this. Photos, text messages, dates, times, locations. 8 months of cheating while I was working 12-hour days to pay for the life you were living. 8 months of making me feel like I wasn't enough while you were betraying me in every way possible. Rachel, please. Marcus finally found his voice, standing up, his hands raised like he could somehow stop this. Please what, Marcus? I asked, my voice sharp. Please keep quiet about this. Please let you humiliate me without consequences. Please just disappear quietly so you don't have to face what you've done. I looked around at all the faces watching us. You all came here tonight thinking you were celebrating a marriage. And I'm sorry to disappoint you. But this marriage ended a long time ago. I just didn't know it yet. So instead of celebrating 10 years of love, let's consider this a celebration of something else, a woman remembering her worth. I turned back to Marcus one last time. You wanted me out of the house tomorrow? Consider this your official notice. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Divorce papers will be filed on Monday. My lawyer has everything documented, every dollar I've contributed, every asset in my name, every text message where you insulted me to your mistress. You're going to find out very quickly what your new life looks like when you don't have me building it for you. I set the microphone down on the nearest table and looked at Patricia, who was watching with her hand over her heart. I'm sorry to ruin your beautiful venue with this drama. Don't apologize, Patricia said fiercely. That was the most badass thing I've ever witnessed. I grabbed my purse, found Audrey in the crowd. She was already pushing through people to get to me, and I walked out of that venue with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear chaos erupting. People were yelling at Marcus, his mother was crying, someone was demanding to know if what I'd said was true. But I didn't look back. I just kept walking, my sister's arm around me, until we reached my car. Holy shit, Audrey breathed. Ratch, that was. I know, I said, and suddenly I was shaking. the adrenaline draining out of me all at once. Oh my God, I just did that. You did, Audrey said, hugging me tight. And it was perfect. You were perfect. He's destroyed, and you're a fucking legend. I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that might have also been a sob. I can never show my face in Charlotte again. Are you kidding? You just became every woman's hero. Trust me, by tomorrow morning, every wife in this city is going to be buying you drinks. I got in my car. Audrey insisted on driving me home in her car and coming back for mine later, and as we pulled out of the estate's parking lot, my phone started buzzing. Text messages, dozens of them, from people who'd been at the party. Asterisk, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Asterisk. Asterisk, Marcus is an asshole. I'm so sorry, Rachel. Asterisk. Asterisk, can I hire you to confront my ex? That was amazing. Asterisk. Asterisk, I always knew he was no good. You deserved better. Asterisk. Asterisk, iconic. Absolutely iconic. Are you okay? Asterisk. I scrolled through them, tears streaming down my face, not sure if I was crying from grief or relief or just the sheer emotional overload of what I'd done. Do you regret it? Audrey asked quietly as we drove. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I'd just blown up my marriage in front of 300 people. I'd exposed my husband's affair publicly, humiliated him the way he tried to humiliate me, made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. No, I said finally. I don't regret it at all. And I meant it. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face the house, our house, my house, knowing Marcus would eventually show up there, either to grovel or to rage or to try to somehow spin what had happened into something that wasn't entirely his fault. Instead, Audrey took me to her apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in Plaza Midwood where I'd crashed plenty of times over the years after late-night sisters' wine sessions. She made me tea even though what I really wanted was vodka, helped me out of my emerald dress and into a pair of her sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, and sat with me on her couch while my phone continued to blow up with messages. You should turn it off, she suggested gently. I can't, I said, scrolling through the notifications with a kind of horrified fascination. I need to see. I need to know what people are saying. Most of the messages were supportive. Friends expressing shock at Marcus's behavior, colleagues from my business telling me they had my back, even a few of Marcus's own friends apologizing for not seeing what kind of person he was. But there were other messages too, the kind I'd been afraid of. People saying I'd handled it poorly, that I should have dealt with it privately, that public humiliation wasn't the answer no matter what he'd done. Asterisk, that was really uncomfortable to watch. Asterisk, wrote Jennifer Morrison, Marcus's colleague who'd complimented my dress earlier. Asterisk, you both could have handled that better. Asterisk. Asterisk, I understand you're hurt, but that was a bit much. Asterisk, said Richard Palmer, one of our couple friends. Asterisk, Marcus made a mistake, but you didn't have to destroy him like that. Asterisk. Asterisk, there are two sides to every story. Asterisk, wrote someone whose name I barely recognized. Asterisk, maybe if you'd paid more attention to your appearance and your marriage, he wouldn't have strayed. Asterisk. That last one made Audrey snatch the phone out of my hand. Absolutely not, she said firmly. You're not reading any more of this bullshit tonight. The people who matter know what he did. The people who don't get it can fuck right off. But even with the phone out of reach, I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. The ones that implied I'd overreacted, that I'd been too harsh, that I should have been more understanding of a man who cheated on me for 8 months and then announced he was leaving me at our anniversary party. This is what women deal with. We're allowed to be hurt, but not angry. We're allowed to cry, but not confront. We're supposed to handle our pain gracefully, quietly, privately, in ways that don't make anyone else uncomfortable. And if we dare to make a scene, if we dare to publicly call out the men who've wronged us, we're the ones who get labeled as crazy, vindictive, out of control. Ratch, Audrey said, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. Listen to me. What you did tonight. That took courage. Marcus tried to humiliate you in front of everyone you both know. He announced he was kicking you out of a house you built. You had every right to defend yourself, to tell the truth about what he's been doing. Anyone who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve your energy. I know, I whispered. What if I made everything worse? What if people think I'm... Stop, Audrey interrupted. You're catastrophizing. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, things will look different. She was wrong. Tomorrow, things looked so much worse. I woke up at 6 on Audrey's couch, my phone still mercifully turned off, my body aching from the uncomfortable sleeping position and the emotional toll of the night before. Audrey was already up, making coffee in her kitchen, and when she saw me stirring, she brought me a mug with an expression I couldn't quite read. Okay, she said carefully, sitting down next to me. So there's something you should probably know before you turn your phone back on. My stomach dropped. What happened? Someone at the party last night recorded part of your speech. The part where you confronted Marcus. And they posted it on social media. What? I sat up so fast I almost spilled coffee on myself. Who? How much of it? I don't know who, but it's the whole thing. From when Marcus said he wanted you out of the house, through your entire response. Rachel, it's gone viral. She handed me her phone, and there it was, a video with 2.3 million views and climbing. I could see myself on screen, standing in the center of that room in my emerald dress, calmly and systematically destroying my husband in front of 300 witnesses. The comments were a war zone. She ate that. This is what standing up for yourself looks like. Wait, he announced he was leaving her their anniversary party, and told her to leave his house? That he didn't even pay for? The audacity, This is the most satisfying revenge I've ever seen. Chef's kiss. But also, this seems staged. No way this is real. She's just as bad as he is. Two wrongs don't make a right. Imagine publicly destroying your husband because he was honest about his feelings. She sounds like a nightmare to be married to. Maybe if she'd spent less time working and more time on her marriage, this wouldn't have happened. I scrolled through hundreds of comments, my hands shaking. The video had been shared across multiple platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. People who didn't know me, who'd never met Marcus, who had no stake in our lives whatsoever, were weighing in on the worst moment of my marriage. This is a nightmare, I said. Audrey, everyone can see this. Everyone I know, everyone I work with, everyone in Charlotte. I know, she said quietly. But Rach, look at the ratio. For every negative comment, there are 10 positive ones. People are on your side. They're calling Marcus out, they're sharing their own stories of betrayal, they're saying you did what they wish they'd had the courage to do. She was right. The overwhelming majority of comments were supportive, even celebratory. Women were tagging their friends, saying things like, "This is the energy we need and every cheating husband should watch this." Men were commenting too, surprisingly, many of them saying Marcus deserved what he got, that you can't treat your wife like garbage and expect no consequences. But I couldn't focus on the positive comments. I could only see the negative ones, the ones that confirmed my worst fears about what I'd done. I'd made myself a spectacle. I'd turned my private pain into public entertainment. I'd given thousands of strangers permission to judge my marriage, my choices, my response to betrayal. I need to go home, I said suddenly, standing up. I need to get my things, figure out what to do next. I can't just... Rachel, slow down, Audrey tried to say, but I was already moving, grabbing my dress from where she'd hung it, looking for my shoes. I made Audrey drive me back to the estate to get my car. It was still in the parking lot from the night before, and then I drove home alone, ignoring her protests that she should come with me. The house looked the same as always. Beautiful, imposing, surrounded by the dogwoods I'd planted that were still in bloom. The driveway was empty, Marcus's car wasn't there, which meant he either hadn't come home at all or had already left. I walked through the front door and immediately knew he'd been there. His cologne still hung in the air, and there were things missing: his laptop from the kitchen counter, his jacket from the coat closet, the framed photo of us from our wedding day that had sat on the entryway table. I walked through the house in a daze, cataloguing what was gone. His clothes from the closet, his toiletries from the bathroom, his books from the office shelves. He'd taken his things and left, just like that. After 10 years, after everything we'd built, everything I'd built, he'd packed up what mattered to him and disappeared. There was a note on the kitchen counter, written in his familiar handwriting on a page torn from one of my planning notebooks. Asterisk Rachel, asterisk. Asterisk I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. You're right about everything. The house, the money, the affair, all of it. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you in ways I can never make right. Asterisk. Asterisk I'm staying with a friend for now. I'll be in touch through my lawyer about the divorce proceedings. You deserve everything, the house, the assets, whatever you want. I won't fight you. Asterisk. Asterisk for what it's worth, I did love you. I just lost sight of what mattered. And now I've lost everything. Asterisk. Asterisk I'm sorry. Asterisk. Asterisk Marcus asterisk. I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something. Vindication, maybe, or satisfaction that he was finally taking responsibility. But all I felt was empty. Hollow. Like I'd burned down something that had already been dead without realizing that the ashes would still sting. My phone rang. Simon, my lawyer. Rachel, he said when I answered, his voice cautious. Have you seen the video? Yes. Okay. So here's where we stand. Marcus's lawyer called me this morning. Marcus is prepared to sign whatever divorce agreement we present. He's not contesting property division, he's not asking for alimony, he's not fighting you on anything. He essentially wants this done as quickly and quietly as possible. Quietly, I repeated with a bitter laugh. That ship has sailed. Yes, well. Simon cleared his throat. The video does complicate things slightly. But actually, it works in your favor. Public sentiment is largely on your side, and Marcus's professional reputation is taking a significant hit. His company has been flooded with complaints about having a cheater representing them. So he's motivated to settle quickly. We talked for another 20 minutes about timelines and paperwork and what came next. North Carolina required a year-long separation period before a divorce could be finalized, but we could file immediately and begin the separation clock. Property division could be settled out of court if both parties agreed, which Marcus apparently was eager to do. It should have felt like winning. Instead, it felt like watching something die in slow motion. After I hung up with Simon, I walked through the house again, really looking at it this time. Every room was a memory. The kitchen where we'd cooked together in those early years. The living room where we'd watched movies and entertained friends. The office where I'd spent countless hours working on designs and budgets while Marcus sat across from me doing his own work, our feet touching under the desk. The bedroom where we'd made love and made plans and made promises we couldn't keep. I'd built this house with my own 2 hands, poured my money and my time and my dreams into every detail. And now it just felt like a mausoleum for a marriage that had died without me noticing. My phone rang again. Keisha this time, my office manager. Boss, she said, and I could hear the tension in her voice. We need to talk. The office has been getting calls all morning. Some are supportive, but some are not great. We've had 2 clients ask to postpone meetings because they don't want to be associated with the drama. My chest tightened. Who? The Hendersons and the Millers. Both said they need time to reassess working with us. The Hendersons were a $600,000 project. The Millers were even bigger, close to $1 million. If I lost those contracts because of what I'd done last night. Keisha, Before you spiral, she interrupted, you should also know that we've gotten 5 new inquiry calls this morning. All from women who saw the video and specifically want to hire you because they respect what you did. One of them is Claire Donovan. I sucked in a breath. Claire Donovan was a real estate developer, one of the biggest in Charlotte. She'd been trying to hire me for years, but I'd never had the capacity to take on her projects. She wants to meet with you tomorrow if possible, Keisha continued. Said she's been looking for a contractor with spine and integrity, and apparently you demonstrated both in abundance last night. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was losing clients and gaining clients in the same breath, all because I'd made a very public scene at my anniversary party. Schedule the meeting, I said finally. And Keisha, thank you for not judging me. Boss, I've been divorced twice from cheating husbands, she said dryly. The only thing I'm judging is that you didn't throw a drink in his face before the speech. But we can't all be perfect. I spent the rest of that Sunday in the house I'd built, alternating between crying and feeling nothing at all. I fielded calls from my mother, horrified and sympathetic, and from friends who wanted to check on me, and from my aunt who said I should have handled it differently, and from one of Marcus's cousins who called to apologize for him. And I watched the video of myself. Over and over, I watched this woman in an emerald dress stand in front of 300 people and reclaim her power. And I tried to figure out if I was proud of her or ashamed of her or both. By Monday morning, the video had 15 million views. I was viral. A meme. A symbol of either feminist empowerment or vindictive overreaction, depending on who you asked. And I had to figure out how to live with that, how to move forward, how to be Rachel Bennett in a world where millions of strangers thought they knew my story. But before I could figure any of that out, I had to survive the fallout. And the fallout, it turned out, was just beginning. If you've never been internet famous, even accidentally, even briefly, you can't understand what it does to your sense of reality. Monday morning, I woke up to find my Instagram had gained 20,000 followers overnight. My business Facebook page had hundreds of comments. Someone had created a Reddit thread dissecting every aspect of my marriage based solely on a 3-minute video. There were TikTok response videos, YouTube commentary, think pieces on websites I'd never heard of. I was Rachel Bennett, 34-year-old construction business owner from Charlotte, North Carolina. And suddenly I was Anniversary Revenge Woman, a character in a story that millions of people felt entitled to have opinions about. The meeting with Claire Donovan was at 10. I forced myself to shower, to put on professional clothes, to cover the dark circles under my eyes with the expensive concealer I'd bought just days ago for the anniversary party. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the bathroom I designed with its custom tile work and rainfall shower, and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired. Older than 34. But there was something different in her eyes too, something harder and more certain than had been there a week ago. I drove to my office in a daze, hyper-aware of every person I passed on the street, wondering if they'd seen the video, if they recognized me, if they were judging me. The parking lot of my office building felt like a gauntlet. My company, Bennett Construction, operated out of a renovated warehouse in Noda that I bought and fixed up 5 years ago. Usually, I loved pulling into this space, seeing the sign with my father's last name, my name, hanging proudly on the brick exterior. Today, I just wanted to hide. Keisha met me at the door with coffee and a look that was equal parts sympathy and amusement. "You're trending on Twitter," she announced. "Number 3 nationally, right below some celebrity scandal and above a political thing. Congratulations, boss. You've achieved every woman's dream, becoming famous for your husband being a piece of shit." "Keisha," I said weakly. "Too soon." She shrugged. "Come on. Claire Donovan is already here. She's early." And she brought her lawyer and her business manager, which either means she's very serious about working with you or she's about to serve you with papers for something. Could go either way. Claire Donovan was in her mid-50s, a powerhouse of a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet when she entered. She stood up when I walked into the conference room, extending her hand with a smile that seemed genuine. "Rachel Bennett," she said warmly. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I know this must be a difficult time." "That's one way to put it," I said, shaking her hand. "Thank you for coming." We sat down, and Claire got straight to business. "I'll be direct because I respect your time. I have 3 major projects in development right now, a mixed-use residential and commercial complex in Southend, a boutique hotel in Dilworth, and a luxury townhome community in Myers Park. Combined, We're looking at about $12 million in construction costs. I want to hire Bennett Construction as the general contractor for all three. I blinked. $12 million. That was more than I'd done in total contracts in the past 2 years combined. That's incredibly generous, I said carefully. But I have to ask, is this because of the video? Claire smiled. Partly, yes. I'll be honest with you, Rachel. I've been following your career for years. You're one of the few female contractors in Charlotte doing this level of work, and you're good at it. Your projects come in on time, on budget, and the quality is consistently excellent. I've wanted to work with you for a while, but you've always been fully booked. She leaned forward. What happened on Saturday night doesn't change my opinion of your professional capabilities. If anything, it reinforced something I already believed about you. You're not someone who backs down when things get difficult. You're not afraid to stand up for yourself. Those are qualities I value in a business partner. Some people would say what I did was unprofessional, I said quietly. That I handled my personal life in a way that reflects poorly on my judgment. Some people would be wrong, Claire said firmly. Your husband publicly humiliated you and tried to kick you out of a house you built with your own money. You defended yourself. The fact that it happened at a party instead of in private doesn't make you unprofessional, it makes you human. And frankly, Rachel, I'm tired of watching women apologize for having human reactions to inhuman treatment. Her lawyer, a thin man in his 40s named Robert, chimed in. We've done our due diligence. Bennett Construction has an excellent reputation. Your financials are solid. Your crew is loyal, experienced, and well managed. None of that changes because your personal life became public. In fact, added Claire's business manager, a woman named Patricia, our market research over the weekend suggests that your visibility right now could actually be an asset. There's a significant demographic of women-owned businesses and female consumers who specifically want to work with companies run by women who embody the kind of strength you demonstrated. Partnering with you could enhance our brand image. I sat there trying to process this. They weren't offering me charity. They were offering me a business opportunity based on a calculated assessment that my very public breakdown, or breakthrough, depending on your perspective, made me more valuable, not less. I need to be honest with you about something, I said finally. I've lost 2 clients since Saturday. Both cited the drama as their reason for pulling out. If I take on your projects and then more clients leave because they don't want to be associated with me, I might not have the capacity or the cash flow to deliver on what you're asking for. Claire nodded. We've taken that into account. Part of the contract would include a significant upfront payment, 30% instead of the usual 10%, to ensure you have the working capital you need. We're willing to take that risk because we believe in your capabilities. We talked for another hour about timelines, specifications, expectations. Claire's team had clearly done their homework. They knew my work, understood my process, and were asking intelligent questions about how I'd approach their projects. By the end of the meeting, we had a preliminary agreement that Robert would formalize into a contract within the week. When they left, I sat alone in my conference room with my head in my hands, trying to reconcile what had just happened. I'd gotten the biggest opportunity of my professional life, and it was directly because I'd had a very public meltdown at my anniversary party. You okay, boss? Keisha poked her head in. I don't know, I admitted. Is it wrong that I got this contract because of the video? Does that make me someone who's profiting off my own humiliation? Keisha came in and sat down across from me. Rachel, listen to me. You didn't ask for that video to go viral. You didn't plan for millions of people to see the worst moment of your marriage. But it happened, and now you have a choice. Let it destroy you, or use it to move forward. Claire Donovan is offering you a chance to build something bigger than what you had before. Take it. You've earned it through years of hard work, not because of one video. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still felt strange, like I was living in a reality slightly left of the one I'd known just 3 days ago. The rest of that week was a blur of phone calls, meetings, and managing the chaos that had become my life. The divorce papers were filed on Tuesday. Marcus's lawyer sent over a proposed settlement agreement by Wednesday. I would keep the house, the business, and 90% of our combined assets. He would take his car, his personal belongings, and his 401k, and he waived any claim to alimony or spousal support. This is remarkably generous, Simon told me. Or more accurately, Marcus is remarkably desperate to make this go away. Have you seen what's happening to him? I asked. I had. I couldn't help myself. Marcus's employer, a pharmaceutical company called MedFirst Solutions, had issued a statement distancing themselves from his personal conduct. 3 major clients had dropped him. His LinkedIn profile had been flooded with negative comments. Someone had created a Marcus Bennett is a cheater Facebook page that had gained 50,000 followers. And Brooke Sinclair, the 26-year-old pharmaceutical rep he'd been having an affair with, had broken up with him. She'd posted a tearful video on her Instagram explaining that she'd had no idea he was planning to leave his wife so publicly, that she'd been misled about the state of his marriage, and that she was horrified by his behavior. The comments on her video were mixed, with some people sympathizing and others calling her complicit. I didn't feel sorry for her. I should have, maybe. She was young, she'd been lied to, she was also suffering consequences from Marcus's actions. But I couldn't muster the empathy. She'd known he was married. She'd participated in his betrayal of me for 8 months. The fact that she didn't like how it ended didn't make her innocent. Marcus himself had gone silent. His social media accounts were deactivated. His phone went to voicemail. According to mutual friends who'd reached out to me, he was devastated and hiding out somewhere, unable to face the public fallout from the video. Part of me felt vindicated. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For him to face consequences, to feel humiliated, to understand what he'd lost. But another part of me felt nothing but emptiness. Our marriage was over. The man I'd loved for a decade was destroyed, publicly and professionally. And I was famous for being betrayed. Was this winning? It didn't feel like winning. On Thursday, I got a call from a producer at a major morning show. They wanted me to come on and tell my story. They were offering to fly me to New York, put me up in a hotel, give me a platform to share my truth with their millions of viewers. Absolutely not, I told Keisha when she passed along the message. I'm not turning this into a media tour. Are you sure? She asked. Because they're offering $15,000 for one interview. I stared at her. They want to pay me to talk about my divorce. Apparently, the video has made you a hot commodity. You could probably book a whole circuit of interviews if you wanted. News shows, podcasts, maybe even a book deal. Women's empowerment angle, standing up to a cheating husband, reclaiming your power, it's all very marketable right now. The idea made me feel sick. I'm not selling my marriage. I'm not turning the worst thing that's ever happened to me into a product. Okay, Keisha said gently. Just wanted you to know the option exists. By Friday, the video had been viewed over 30 million times. I'd been written about in Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, the Daily Mail, and countless other outlets. There were think pieces debating whether I'd handled things correctly. There were social media arguments between people who thought I was a hero and people who thought I was vindictive. There were memes, of course. My face photoshopped onto various boss babe images with captions like, "When he forgets you built the house and know your worth, then add tax." I tried to go about my normal life. I went to job sites, I met with my crew, I reviewed blueprints and permits and budgets. But everywhere I went, people recognized me. Contractors who'd worked with me for years suddenly looked at me differently, some with admiration, some with pity, some with discomfort. The guy at my favorite coffee shop asked for a selfie. A woman at the grocery store stopped me to tell me I was an inspiration. "You did what every woman wishes she could do," she said, gripping my arm. "Thank you for showing us that we don't have to take that kind of treatment." I smiled and thanked her and got out of there as fast as I could, because what was I supposed to say? That I hadn't planned to be an inspiration? That I'd just been angry and hurt and looking for a way to make the pain stop? That I had no idea if what I'd done was right or wrong or somewhere in between? The truth is, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved completely, you know that there's no right way to handle it. There's just the way you handle it, and then you live with the consequences and hope you can eventually make peace with your choices. Friday night, I sat alone in my house. The house I'd built, the house I'd fought for, the house that was now legally, unequivocally mine, and I opened a bottle of wine. I walked through every room, remembering the good times, because there had been good times once. The early years when Marcus and I had been happy, when we'd laughed and dreamed and believed we were building something that would last forever. I stood in the master bedroom looking at the empty side of the closet where his clothes used to hang, and I let myself cry for the marriage I'd lost. Not the marriage I'd actually had, the one with the cheating and the resentment and the lies, but the marriage I'd thought I had. The one I'd believed in right up until Diane had shown me those photos. I grieved for the woman I used to be, the one who'd trusted so completely that she'd never thought to protect herself. And I grieved for the future I'd imagined, the one with children and anniversaries and growing old together. But more than anything, I grieved for the fact that I'd built something beautiful, this house, this life, this marriage, and it had all been constructed on a foundation that was rotting from the inside. I'd been so focused on the structure that I'd never looked at what was holding it up. My phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. * You okay? Want company? *. *I'm okay. * I texted back. * Just processing. I'll call you tomorrow. *. * Proud of you, sis. You're going to get through this. *. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I appreciated the sentiment. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the anniversary party that had changed everything, I woke up to find the video had started to fade from the top trending topics. Something else had captured the internet's attention, some new scandal or viral moment, and I was slowly becoming yesterday's news. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt oddly abandoned, like the millions of people who'd been invested in my story had moved on without me, leaving me alone with the actual, messy reality of rebuilding a life. But maybe that was okay. Maybe that was what I needed, for the noise to die down so I could figure out who I was now, in this new version of my life where I was Rachel Bennett, divorced, successful, viral, and trying to move forward. I made coffee. I sat on my back porch watching the sun rise over the property I owned. And I made a decision. I was done performing for anyone else's expectations. No more interviews, no more explaining myself, no more worrying about whether I'd handled things the right way. I'd stood up for myself when my husband tried to humiliate me. I'd told the truth about what he'd done. And I'd fought to keep what was mine. If that made me vindictive or inspirational or controversial or empowering, that was for other people to decide. I just needed to figure out how to live with myself, and how to build something new from what was left. And if there's one thing I knew how to do, it was build. The thing about revenge that nobody tells you is that it doesn't actually make you feel better. It doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't erase the months of lying, the text messages where you were mocked, the photographs of your husband with another woman. All it does is create a different kind of pain, the kind that comes from knowing you've permanently altered the landscape of your life in a way you can never take back. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, I was sitting in Simon's office signing the final property settlement agreement. Marcus had signed his copy 3 days earlier, apparently via overnight mail from wherever he was hiding. We hadn't spoken since the night of the party. Every communication had gone through lawyers, reduced to legal language and financial terms, as if 10 years of marriage could be summarized in a dozen pages of legalese. "This is remarkably favorable to you," Simon said again, reviewing the documents one last time. "The house, 90% of the liquid assets, your business remains entirely yours, no alimony obligations. Rachel, he's basically walking away with nothing but his retirement account and his car." "He should walk away with nothing," I said, my pen poised over the signature line. "He contributed nothing." "Legally speaking, that's not entirely accurate. North Carolina law would entitle him to." "Simon, I know what the law says. But he's not fighting me because he knows if this goes to court, every detail of his affair will become public record. The text messages, the photographs, the hotel receipts, all of it. His career is already hanging by a thread. He can't afford that kind of exposure." I signed my name, the pen pressing hard enough into the paper that I could feel the indent through multiple pages. Rachel Marie Bennett. Still my name, even though the marriage it represented was ending. I'd thought about taking my maiden name back, Cooper, but decided against it. I'd built my business as Bennett Construction, in honor of my father. I wasn't going to let Marcus take that from me too. What about the house? Simon asked gently. Have you thought about whether you want to keep it? I know it has sentimental value, but it might be painful to stay somewhere with so many memories. I'd thought about this question constantly over the past 2 weeks. Every time I walked through that house, I saw Marcus. I saw us cooking together in the kitchen, saw him carrying me over the threshold on move-in day, saw the office where we'd work side by side, saw the bedroom where our marriage had died slowly over months before finally ending explosively. But I also saw my father in that house. I saw the design principles he taught me, the construction techniques I'd learned from watching him work, the dream we'd shared of building beautiful things that would last. Every wall, every fixture, every carefully chosen detail represented not just my marriage to Marcus, but my commitment to the craft my father had passed down to me. I'm keeping it, I said firmly. I built that house. I earned every square foot of it. I'm not letting Marcus's betrayal take it away from me. Simon nodded. Then we're done. The divorce will be final after the mandatory 1-year separation period, assuming no complications. You'll officially be single again by this time next year. Single. The word felt foreign. Impossible. I'd been part of Marcus and Rachel for so long that I didn't remember how to just be Rachel. But I guessed I was about to learn. The projects with Claire Donovan started in early June, about 6 weeks after the anniversary party. By then, the viral video had mostly faded from the internet's collective consciousness, though I still got recognized occasionally. Usually it was women, usually they were kind, and I'd learned to smile and thank them and extract myself from conversations as quickly as possible. The South End mixed-use project was the first to break ground. It was ambitious, a 6-story building with commercial space on the ground floor and residential units above, modern design with lots of glass and sustainable materials, the kind of project that would make or break a contractor's reputation. I threw myself into it with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy but felt necessary. I was on site every day from sunrise to sunset, working alongside my crew, solving problems, inspecting every detail. My team, most of whom had been with me for years, seemed to understand that I needed this. They didn't ask questions about the divorce or the video. They just worked beside me, letting the physical labor and the satisfaction of building something new be enough. You're going to burn yourself out, Keisha warned me one afternoon when I'd been on site for 12 hours straight without a break. I'm fine, I said, reviewing a set of electrical plans that weren't quite right. You're not fine. You're avoiding dealing with your emotions by working yourself to death. It's not sustainable, Rach. She was right, of course. But what was I supposed to do instead? Sit in my empty house thinking about everything I'd lost? Go to therapy and pay someone to tell me things I already knew? Join a support group for women who'd humiliated their husbands on the internet and weren't sure how to feel about it? Work was what I knew. Work was what I could control. If I focused hard enough on blueprints and budgets and building codes, I could almost forget that my personal life was a disaster. Almost. In July, 3 months after the party, I got an email from Marcus. He'd never contacted me directly before, everything had gone through lawyers, so seeing his name in my inbox made my stomach drop. Rachel, I know I have no right to contact you, and if you don't want to respond, I'll understand. But there are some things I need to say, and I didn't want to do it through lawyers. First, I'm sorry. I know I've said that before, but I'm not sure I really understood what I was apologizing for until recently. I'm sorry for the affair, obviously. I'm sorry for how I spoke about you to Brooke, for the things I said that made you feel less than. I'm sorry for taking everything you built and treating it like it was mine to discard. But mostly, I'm sorry for not seeing you. For years, you were working to build something for both of us, and I was so focused on what I wanted, what I felt I deserved, that I never stopped to appreciate what you were actually doing. You were making sacrifices so we could have a good life, and I repaid that by making you feel like your sacrifices made you less attractive, less worthy of love. I've had a lot of time to think over the past few months. My career is basically over. I lost my job 2 weeks after the party, and no one in pharmaceutical sales will touch me. I'm working as a regional manager for a medical supply company now, making about a third of what I used to make. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment in a part of town I would have turned my nose up at a year ago. And you know what? I deserve all of it. I deserve to lose everything, because I didn't appreciate what I had when I had it. You were always too good for me, Rachel. I just convinced myself that I was somehow doing you a favor by staying. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, what I destroyed. And I'm sorry. I'll be sorry for the rest of my life. I hope you're building something beautiful. You're good at that. Marcus. I read the email 7 times, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But it just seemed like what it claimed to be, a genuine apology from a man who'd finally realized what he'd lost. I should have felt vindicated. Wasn't this what I'd wanted? For Marcus to suffer, to understand, to recognize that he'd thrown away something valuable? But all I felt was tired. Tired of being angry, tired of holding on to pain, tired of defining myself by what he'd done to me. I didn't respond to the email. Maybe I would eventually, maybe I wouldn't. But for now, I just archived it and went back to work. By September, the South End project was ahead of schedule and under budget. Claire Donovan was thrilled, and she'd already started talking about future projects, about making Bennett Construction her exclusive contractor for all her developments. My business was thriving in ways I'd never imagined. I'd hired 8 new employees to handle the increased workload. We'd bid on and won 3 additional contracts beyond Claire's projects. Revenue was up 60% over the previous year. Professionally, I was more successful than I'd ever been. But personally, I was still figuring out how to exist in this new version of my life. I'd started therapy in August, finally took Keisha's advice and found a counselor who specialized in trauma and betrayal. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she was patient and insightful and completely unimpressed by my attempts to intellectualize my emotions. "You're very good at telling me what happened," she observed during our 4th session. "You're very good at analyzing Marcus's behavior, at understanding the sequence of events. But you're not very good at telling me how you feel." "I feel angry," I said. "That's a start. What else?" "I don't know. Relieved. Sad. Confused about whether I did the right thing." "Do you regret what you said at the party?" I'd been asked this question dozens of times, by friends, by family, by strangers on the internet, by myself in the middle of sleepless nights. And I still didn't have a good answer. "I regret that it became public," I said slowly. "I regret that millions of people saw the worst moment of my life. But do I regret telling the truth about what Marcus did? Do I regret defending myself when he tried to humiliate me? No, I don't regret that." "Then maybe," Dr. Chen suggested, "you need to stop letting other people's opinions about how you handled it make you question yourself." It sounded simple when she said it. It was much harder in practice. In October, 6 months after the anniversary party, I had dinner with Audrey at a new restaurant in South End, just a few blocks from the project I was building for Claire Donovan. We were celebrating. Audrey had just been promoted to nurse supervisor at the hospital, and I'd signed the biggest contract of my career, a $15 million luxury development that would keep Bennett Construction busy for the next 3 years. "Look at us," Audrey said, raising her wine glass. 2 Cooper girls who refused to let life keep them down. I clinked my glass against hers. "Dad would be proud." "He would," she agreed. "You know what else? I think he'd be proud of how you handled Marcus. Dad never tolerated people who took advantage, who didn't pull their own weight. He would have been furious about what Marcus did to you." I thought about my father, about the way he'd always treated people with respect but expected respect in return. About how he taught me that being kind didn't mean being weak, that you could be compassionate and still have boundaries, that standing up for yourself wasn't the same as being vindictive. I miss him, I said quietly. Me too. But Rach, look at what you've built. The business, the reputation, the life you've created, that's his legacy. That's what he gave you. Marcus tried to take it, but he couldn't, because it was never Marcus's to take. It was always yours. That night, driving home to the house I'd fought for, I felt something shift. Not happiness exactly, and not closure, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. Acceptance that my marriage was over. Acceptance that I'd handled the ending in the only way I knew how. Acceptance that I was going to be okay, even if I didn't feel okay yet. I pulled into my driveway and looked at the house. My house, with its dogwoods and its wraparound porch and all the dreams I'd poured into it. It looked different now, less like a monument to a failed marriage and more like a testament to what I could create when I believed in myself. I'd built this house once for Marcus and me. Maybe it was time to rebuild it for just me. New paint, new furniture, new memories that had nothing to do with a man who'd forgotten my worth. The divorce would be final in March, 6 months from now. And when it was, I was going to throw myself a party. Not a celebration of revenge or vindication, but a celebration of survival. Of resilience. Of becoming the kind of woman who could lose everything and still stand tall. I was Rachel Bennett. I built things. And I was finally ready to start building a future that belonged only to me. I'd been saying no to interview requests for 6 months when the one came that I couldn't refuse. It was December, 8 months after the anniversary party, and I was in my office reviewing year-end financials when Keisha knocked on my door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're going to want to hear this," she said, coming in and closing the door behind her. "If it's another podcast wanting me to talk about the video, the answer is still no," I said without looking up from my laptop. "It's not a podcast. It's Diane Sawyer." My head snapped up. What? ABC News. They're doing a special on women standing up to abuse and betrayal, and they want to interview you. It would air during prime time, probably reach 15 to 20 million viewers. Absolutely not. They're offering $75,000. I stared at her. They want to pay me $75,000 to talk about my divorce. They want to pay you to tell your story in a way that's thoughtful and meaningful instead of sensationalized. Diane Sawyer, Rach. This isn't some tabloid show. This is legitimate journalism. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. I turned down dozens of interview requests because I didn't want to be reduced to clickbait, didn't want my pain turned into entertainment. But Diane Sawyer was different. She was respected, serious, known for handling difficult subjects with nuance and compassion. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "They need an answer by Friday. That's 2 days." I spent those 2 days agonizing over the decision. I talked to Audrey, who thought I should do it. I talked to Dr. Chen, who asked me what I was hoping to accomplish. I talked to Simon, who warned me that anything I said could potentially be used in the divorce proceedings, though since Marcus had already agreed to everything, it was unlikely. Most importantly, I asked myself why I'd said no to every other interview. And I realized it was because I'd been ashamed. Not of what Marcus had done, but of what I'd done, of making a scene, of handling my pain so publicly, of becoming a viral video instead of dealing with my marriage privately like an adult. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that shame was exactly what people wanted me to feel. Women who made scenes were supposed to be embarrassed. Women who called out their husbands publicly were supposed to apologize for not handling things more gracefully. Fuck that. I called the producer back on Friday morning. "I'll do the interview. But I have conditions." The interview was scheduled for January, in New York. They flew me up on a Tuesday, put me in a nice hotel in Midtown, and sent a stylist to help me prepare. The stylist, a woman named Jasmine who was probably 10 years younger than me, kept saying things like, "We want you to look powerful but approachable, and let's go for sophisticated but not intimidating." I want to look like myself, I told her finally. Not some made-for-TV version of myself. Just me. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Let's do that. The taping was in a studio in Manhattan, just me and Diane Sawyer and about a dozen crew members. I'd expected to be nervous, but instead, I felt calm. Clear. Like I'd spent 8 months preparing for this conversation without knowing it. Diane was warm and professional, putting me at ease before the cameras started rolling. When they did, she didn't waste time with softball questions. Rachel, on April 6th of this year, you attended what was supposed to be your 10th anniversary party. Instead, it became the night you publicly confronted your husband about his affair and his plans to leave you. Take me back to that moment. What were you feeling when you took that microphone? I took a breath, remembering. I was feeling a lot of things. Hurt, angry, betrayed. But mostly, I think I was feeling done. Done with being diminished, done with making myself smaller to make someone else comfortable, done with the narrative that I was somehow the problem in my marriage because I'd focused on building a career instead of maintaining whatever impossible standard of beauty my husband had decided I was failing to meet. Your husband Marcus had told you, in front of 300 guests, that he wanted you out of the house. The house that you had built and paid for. Yes. And you corrected that narrative rather forcefully. I smiled slightly. I did. Because he'd forgotten something important. That house was mine. The life we'd been living was mine. I'd built it, earned it, paid for it. He'd just been living in it. Diane leaned forward. Some people watching that video said you were vindictive. That you could have handled it privately, that making such a public scene was unnecessary. This was the question I'd been waiting for. Diane, Marcus made it public when he announced at our anniversary party, in front of everyone we knew, that he was leaving me for someone more beautiful and wanted me out of the house. He made the choice to humiliate me in that moment. All I did was tell the truth about the situation. If the truth made him look bad, that's because what he did was bad. Not because I was vindictive in sharing it. You'd known about the affair for several weeks before the party. Yes. Why didn't you confront him privately during that time? I'd asked myself this question 1,000 times. Because privately, Marcus could have controlled the narrative. He could have made excuses, could have convinced me it was somehow my fault, could have walked away on his terms. I wanted him to face consequences. I wanted everyone who knew us to understand what he'd done, what kind of person he was. Maybe that makes me vindictive. But it felt like the only way to take back some of the power he'd taken from me over the years. We talked for 90 minutes, covering everything, the affair, the business I'd built, the house, the viral video, the aftermath. Diane asked tough questions, but they felt fair, like she was genuinely trying to understand rather than trap me. Do you regret it? She asked near the end. If you could go back to that night, would you do it differently? I'd been asked this so many times, and I'd never been fully honest about my answer. But sitting there with Diane Sawyer, with cameras recording every word for millions of people to eventually see, I decided to tell the truth. Parts of it, yes. I regret that it became a viral video. I regret that my worst moment is out there forever for anyone to see. I regret that I gave people ammunition to judge my marriage, my choices, my response to betrayal. I paused. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret telling the truth about what Marcus did? No, I don't. Because for 10 years, I made myself small for him. I ignored warning signs. I excused behavior that should have been inexcusable. I convinced myself that love meant accepting less than I deserved. That night at the party, I finally stopped doing that. And whatever the consequences of that decision, at least I can live with myself knowing I didn't just disappear quietly when someone tried to erase me. The interview aired 3 weeks later. 22 million people watched it. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, women sharing their own stories of betrayal and revenge and survival. But there were critics too, people who still thought I'd handled things poorly, that I was bitter and vindictive and should have taken the high road. I read some of the responses, ignored most of them, and tried to focus on what Dr. Chen had told me: you can't control how people interpret. The Diane Sawyer interview changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. Within a week of it airing, Bennett Construction's website crashed from traffic. We received over 300 inquiries from potential clients, some legitimate, many just wanting to be associated with that woman from the interview. Keisha had to hire a part-time assistant just to handle the volume of calls and emails. "This is insane," she said, standing in my office doorway with a stack of messages. "Half of these are from women asking if you do residential renovations. The other half are from people wanting you to speak at events. Someone offered $20,000 for you to give a keynote at a women's leadership conference." "I'm a contractor, not a motivational speaker," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized how absurd they sounded. I'd become both, whether I'd intended to or not. The speaking invitation was from an organization called Women Build, a national non-profit that helped women enter construction trades. They were having their annual conference in March, the same month my divorce would be finalized, and they wanted me as their closing keynote speaker. "You should do it," Audrey said when I told her about the offer over dinner that weekend. "You have something to say, Rach. Not just about Marcus, but about being a woman in construction, about building a business, about not letting people diminish you." I don't know what I'd even talk about. "Tell them your story. The real one, not the viral video version. Tell them about Dad, about building the business from nothing, about what you've learned. Tell them the truth." The truth. That seemed to be what people wanted from me now, the thing I'd spent 8 months trying to protect, control, manage. But maybe Audrey was right. Maybe it was time to stop trying to control the narrative and just tell it honestly. I accepted the speaking engagement. February brought an unexpected complication. Marcus wanted to meet in person. His lawyer contacted Simon with a request, explaining that Marcus had some things he wanted to say face-to-face before the divorce was finalized. "You don't have to do this," Simon told me. "Everything is settled legally. You don't owe him a meeting." But some part of me was curious. It had been 10 months since the anniversary party, 10 months since I'd last seen his face. What could he possibly want to say now? We met at a coffee shop in South Park, neutral territory that held no memories for either of us. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a latte I had no intention of drinking, and sat at a corner table trying to calm my racing heart. Marcus walked in at exactly 3 o'clock. He looked different, older, thinner, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, nothing like the expensive clothes he used to favor. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort. "Rachel," he said, sitting down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. You said you had something to tell me." He flinched at my directness but nodded. "I saw the Diane Sawyer interview. I figured. 22 million people saw it. You were honest. Brutally honest. About everything." He paused, his hands wrapped around his own coffee cup. I deserved every word of it. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easier for him. "I'm in therapy now," he continued. "Have been since August. My therapist has helped me understand a lot about why I did what I did, but understanding it doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses what I did to you." "Is that what you wanted to tell me? That you're sorry again?" "No. I mean, yes, I am sorry. But that's not why I asked to meet." He took a breath. "I'm moving. To Colorado. I have a job opportunity there, a chance to start over somewhere that I'm not that guy from the viral video. I wanted to tell you in person because I think you deserve to know that I'm leaving. That you won't have to worry about running into me, about seeing me around town." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt strange emptiness. "When?" "End of March. Right after the divorce is final." We sat in silence for a moment. I studied his face, trying to find the man I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago at that charity gala. He was in there somewhere, beneath the lines and the exhaustion and the weight of what he'd done. "I hope you find what you're looking for in Colorado," I said finally, and I meant it. "I hope you find what you're looking for here," he replied. "Though it seems like you already have. Your business is thriving. You're building incredible things. You're exactly who you were always meant to be. No thanks to you." He smiled sadly. "No. No thanks to me. But maybe in spite of me. Maybe I was holding you back all those years, and you just didn't realize it until I was gone." It was an uncomfortable truth that I'd been avoiding. My business had exploded after our separation. I'd taken on bigger projects, hired more people, expanded in ways I'd never dared to before. Had Marcus been holding me back? Or had I been holding myself back, keeping my ambitions small enough that they wouldn't threaten him, wouldn't make him feel less than? "I have to go," I said, standing up. "I have a site inspection at 4. Marcus stood too. For a moment, I thought he might try to hug me or shake my hand or something, but he just nodded. "Goodbye, Rachel. I really do hope you build something beautiful." "I already have," I said, and I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. The Women Build conference was in Atlanta, a 5-hour drive from Charlotte. I went down the day before my speech, checked into the hotel, and spent the evening in my room going over my notes and wondering what the hell I'd been thinking agreeing to this. The conference had over 1,000 attendees, women in construction from across the country, from electricians and plumbers to architects and contractors. They were young and old, every race and background, united by the simple fact that they'd chosen to work in an industry that still didn't always welcome them. I gave my speech on the last day of the conference, in a ballroom packed with women who'd come to hear the woman from the viral video talk about building and betrayal and standing up for yourself. I'd written and rewritten the speech a dozen times. The final version was part professional journey, part personal story, and entirely honest in ways that scared me. I talked about my father, about learning construction from him, about taking over his struggling business at 19 and building it into something successful. I talked about the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field, the clients who dismissed me, the contractors who tried to cheat me, the constant battle to prove I knew what I was doing. And then I talked about Marcus. About building him a life while he was tearing down mine. About the affair, the betrayal, the anniversary party that had changed everything. "I don't tell you this story because I think what I did was right or wrong," I said, looking out at 1,000 faces. "I tell you because it's true. And sometimes truth is messy and complicated and doesn't fit into neat categories of good or bad. But it's ours. And we get to decide what to do with it." I talked about the viral video, about the millions of judgments from people who didn't know me, about learning to live with being reduced to a 3-minute clip that would follow me forever. "Here's what I've learned over the past year," I continued. "You can't control how people see you. You can't control whether they judge you or support you or decide you're an inspiration or a cautionary tale. The only thing you can control is who you choose to be, and whether you're willing to stand behind that choice even when it's hard." I paused, looking around the room at faces that reflected back understanding, recognition, shared experience. We work in an industry that tries to make us small, that questions our competence, that pays us less, that treats us like we're playing at something that belongs to men. And for a long time, I let that happen in my personal life too. I let someone make me feel small because I prioritized my work over my appearance, because I built something successful instead of being the perfect wife he wanted. My voice caught slightly, but I pushed through. But I'm done being small. I'm done apologizing for being good at what I do, for building things that matter, for standing up when someone tries to diminish me. And I hope you're done being small too. Because the world needs what we build. It needs our houses and our bridges and our buildings. It needs our skills and our strength and our refusal to disappear quietly. The room erupted in applause. Women stood, some were crying, and I stood at that podium feeling more exposed and more powerful than I'd ever felt in my life. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me. They shared their stories, of abusive husbands, of discrimination at work, of fighting to stay in an industry that didn't want them. They thanked me for being honest, for not pretending it was easy, for showing them that you could survive betrayal and come out stronger. You made me feel less alone, one woman said, gripping my hand. I've been going through a divorce, and everyone keeps telling me I should handle it more gracefully. But you showed me that sometimes grace looks like telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I drove home that night feeling different. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. The story of my marriage and its ending would always be public, would always be attached to my name in a way I couldn't control. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being the woman from the viral video wasn't the worst thing I could be. Maybe there was something valuable in having survived betrayal so publicly that other women could see it was survivable. March 20th arrived with spring sunshine and cherry blossoms. It was the day my divorce was finalized, exactly 1 year after our separation began, exactly 11 months after the anniversary party that had ended everything. I went to the courthouse alone. Marcus wasn't there. His lawyer appeared on his behalf to submit the final documents. The judge reviewed everything, asked a few perfunctory questions, and then declared us legally divorced. It took 15 minutes to end a 10-year marriage. I walked out of that courthouse a single woman, a divorced woman, a woman who'd built an empire and destroyed a marriage and survived becoming internet famous for the worst moment of her life. And I felt okay. Not happy exactly, and not sad. Just okay, which after the year I'd had, felt like a miracle. That evening, I threw myself the party I'd promised myself 6 months earlier. Not a huge affair, just 50 people, mostly my crew and close friends and family, gathered at my house for the first time since I'd kicked Marcus out. I'd redecorated over the past few months, slowly erasing traces of our life together and replacing them with things that were purely mine. New paint in the living room, new furniture in the bedroom, new art on the walls. The house looked different now, felt different. It felt like mine. Audrey raised a toast halfway through the evening. To Rachel, who built this incredible house, this incredible business, and this incredible life. Who showed all of us what it looks like to remember your worth. And who proved that sometimes the best revenge is just being undeniably successful. Everyone cheered. I looked around at these faces, people who'd stood by me through the worst year of my life, who'd shown up when I needed them, who'd never made me feel small or vindictive or wrong for handling my pain the way I did. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. All of you. For being here, for supporting me, for helping me remember who I am when I'd forgotten. I couldn't have survived this year without you. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was alone in my house, I walked out onto the back porch and looked at the property I'd fought so hard to keep. The dogwoods I'd planted were blooming again, just like they had been a year ago when Marcus and I had moved in. But everything else was different now. I was different. I'd lost my marriage, my privacy, my innocence about love and betrayal. But I'd gained something too, the certainty that I could survive anything. That I was strong enough to build myself back up after being torn down. That my worth wasn't determined by whether someone chose to stay or leave, but by what I chose to build with my own 2 hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire Donovan, * congratulations on your freedom. Ready to start planning our next project? *. I smiled and typed back, *always. Because that's who I was now. Not Marcus's ex-wife, not the woman from the viral video, not a cautionary tale or an inspiration or whatever the internet had decided I was. I was Rachel Bennett. I built things. And I was just getting started. April 6th arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt like the universe winking at me. 76 degrees, gentle breeze, cherry blossoms in full bloom. Exactly 1 year since the anniversary party that had changed my life in ways I was still discovering. I woke up in my bed, the bed I bought to replace the one Marcus and I had shared, and for the first time in a year, the date didn't make my stomach clench. I felt peaceful. Maybe even happy. The past year had been a masterclass in survival and reinvention. Bennett Construction was thriving beyond anything I'd imagined. Claire Donovan's projects had all been massive successes, leading to 6 more contracts with her and referrals to other major developers. I'd hired 23 new employees, opened a second office in Raleigh, and had more work booked than I could handle. I'd become a regular speaker at women's conferences and construction industry events. Turned out people were willing to pay me substantial amounts of money to talk about building things, both literal and metaphorical. I'd given 12 keynote speeches in the past year, written articles for construction trade publications, and was even in talks with a publisher about writing a book. The viral video had faded from the internet's collective consciousness, replaced by newer scandals and more recent drama. Occasionally someone still recognized me, but mostly I was just Rachel Bennett again, successful contractor, business owner, woman who'd survived a very public betrayal and come out stronger. My phone rang as I was making coffee. "Audrey. Happy Liberation Day," she said cheerfully. "Don't call it that." "Why not?" "It's the anniversary of the day you freed yourself from a man who didn't deserve you. That's worth celebrating." She wasn't wrong. "What are you doing today?" "Working a double shift at the hospital. But I'm off tomorrow, and I'm taking you to that new Italian place in Myers Park. My treat. We're celebrating your freedom and your success and the fact that you're finally dating again." I smiled. Dating was a strong word for the handful of dinners I'd had with David Chen, an architect I'd met through Claire Donovan's projects. We'd gone out 4 times in the past month. Casual, easy, no pressure. He was kind and funny and respected my work, and most importantly, being with him didn't feel like trying to prove anything or shrink myself or compete for attention. "It's only been 4 dates, Audrey. 4 dates is 4 more than you've had in a year. I call that progress. Is he coming to the office party tonight?" The office party. Right. Keisha had insisted on throwing something at the office to celebrate Bennett Construction's best year ever. 50 people were coming, my entire crew, plus some clients and industry colleagues who'd become friends over the years. "I don't think so. I haven't invited him." "Why not?" "Because it feels too soon to bring him into my work world. I'm still figuring out who I am as just me, without someone else attached." "Fair enough," Audrey conceded. "But Rach, you sound good. Really good. Like yourself again, only better." After we hung up, I spent the morning at my South End project site. The mixed-use building that had been Claire's first contract with me was complete now, fully leased with a wait list for the residential units. I'd driven past it yesterday and felt a surge of pride so strong it almost made me cry. I'd built that. Me and my crew, my vision, my leadership. It stood 6 stories tall in the Charlotte skyline, a testament to what was possible when you refused to be diminished. At the site, I ran into Jake Martinez, my lead foreman who'd been with me since the beginning. He was 52, had been in construction his entire life, and had never once questioned my authority or made me feel like I had to prove I belonged. "Boss," he said, walking over with blueprints for the next phase of work. "Got a minute?" We spent an hour going over specs and schedules, solving problems, making decisions. This was what I loved, the tangible reality of building things, the satisfaction of turning drawings into structures that would stand for decades. "You seem happy," Jake observed as we were wrapping up. "I am," I realized. "I really am." "Good. You deserve it. Hell of a year you've had. Hell of a year we've all had. None of this happens without the crew." "True," he acknowledged. "But you're the one who leads us. You're the one who took the hits and kept building anyway. That means something, Rach." The office party started at 6. I'd considered wearing something nice, something that recalled the emerald dress from a year ago, but decided against it. Instead, I wore jeans and a Bennett Construction t-shirt, the uniform I wore to job sites every day. This was who I was now. No pretense, no performance. Just me. The office looked great. Keisha had decorated with string lights and photos from various projects we'd completed over the years. There was food from my favorite caterer, beer and wine, music playing softly in the background. My crew filtered in, relaxed and laughing, celebrating not just the company's success but their own hard work that had made it possible. Claire Donovan arrived at 6:30 with her business manager. "Rachel," she said, hugging me warmly. "Congratulations on an extraordinary year. I can't wait to see what you build next." Thanks to you for taking a chance on me when everyone else was running scared. I didn't take a chance, Claire corrected. I made a smart business decision. You're the best contractor in Charlotte, possibly in North Carolina. The viral video didn't change that. Patricia Hayes from the estate showed up around 7. We hadn't spoken much since the anniversary party, and I wasn't sure how she'd feel about me after I turned her beautiful venue into a crime scene. Rachel, she said, approaching cautiously. I hope it's okay that I came. Keisha invited me, but if you'd rather I leave. Don't be ridiculous, I interrupted. I owe you an apology for ruining your venue that night. Are you kidding? Patricia laughed. That was the most memorable event we've ever hosted. People still ask me about it. I tell them I witnessed history, the moment a woman refused to disappear quietly. She paused. For what it's worth, I think you were incredibly brave. And I'm glad you kept the house. At 8 o'clock, Keisha clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. Okay, everyone. Speech time. Boss, get up here. I stood in front of my crew, my friends, the people who'd helped me survive and rebuild this year, and I felt overwhelming gratitude. A year ago today, I stood in a different room in front of 300 people and said things that changed my life forever. Some of you were there. Most of you saw the video. All of you witnessed the aftermath. People nodded, some smiling, others looking sympathetic. I'm not going to rehash that night or apologize for how I handled it. What I want to say instead is thank you. Thank you for standing by me when things got ugly. Thank you for not treating me differently, for not making me feel like I had to explain or justify my choices. Thank you for just showing up, for working beside me, for trusting me to lead, for helping me remember that I'm more than one viral moment. My voice cracked slightly. This year, Bennett Construction had its best year ever. We completed 8 major projects, hired 23 new people, expanded into new markets. We're booked solid through 2027. We're building things that will stand for generations. I paused. But more than that, we built something else this year. We built a team that doesn't quit when things get hard. We built a company culture that values honesty and strength and refusing to be small. We built proof that you can survive the worst moment of your life and come back stronger. People were clapping now, some wiping away tears. So here's to this year. To everything we've built together. And to everything we're going to build next. The party went until almost midnight. People shared stories, laughed about job site mishaps, made plans for upcoming projects. It felt like family, messy and imperfect and real. When everyone had gone home and I was alone in my office, I pulled up the viral video one last time. I'd avoided watching it for months, unable to face that version of myself standing in her emerald dress telling 300 people exactly what her husband had done. But tonight, I watched it all the way through. And instead of feeling shame or embarrassment or regret, I felt something else, recognition. I recognized that woman. She was scared and hurt and angry, but she was also brave. She refused to accept the narrative someone else was trying to write about her life. She stood up and told the truth, even knowing it would cost her. She was me. And I was proud of her. I drove home through quiet Charlotte streets, past the buildings I'd built, past the life I'd constructed from nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Asterisk, how was the party? Asterisk. Asterisk, perfect. Asterisk, I texted back. Asterisk, thank you for asking. Asterisk. Asterisk, want to grab coffee tomorrow? I'd love to hear about it. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'd like that. Asterisk. At home, I walked through each room of my house, seeing it clearly for the first time in a year. It wasn't a monument to a failed marriage anymore. It wasn't a reminder of betrayal or loss. It was just a house, a beautiful, well-built house that I designed and constructed and earned. But more than that, it was proof. Proof that I could create something lasting. Proof that I could survive devastation and rebuild. Proof that my worth wasn't determined by whether someone chose to love me, but by what I chose to build with my own hands. I walked out onto my back porch and looked at the dogwoods blooming in the moonlight. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and go to a job site. I'd solve problems, make decisions, build things that mattered. I'd have coffee with a man who seemed to genuinely like me for who I was. I'd call my sister and laugh about something stupid. I'd live my life, not the one the internet had decided I was living, not the one defined by a 3-minute video. Just my life. Complicated and messy and mine. And somehow, after everything that had happened, the betrayal, the viral video, the divorce, the year of rebuilding, that felt like enough. It felt like more than enough. It felt like exactly what I'd built it to be. A life worth living. Asterisk if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or angry or hopeful, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you're going through something similar, if you're in the middle of your own story of betrayal and rebuilding, know this, you're stronger than you think. You can survive what feels unsurvivable. And on the other side of the worst moment of your life, there's a version of you waiting who's braver and wiser and more certain of her worth than you ever imagined possible. Asterisk. Asterisk, you just have to be willing to build her. Asterisk.